I suppose many of you are wondering what my last Sanskara is. I wrote to Baba as my last Sanskara many times. I wrote to Mani and said, Baba's my last Sanskara. And the reason is that Baba has said that the greater love draws you away from the lesser love. And in the end, this longing is drowned in the unfathomable stillness of the infinite. So you see, he has to be my last Sanskara. And so what am I talking about? Baba, in effect. So that's the mystery of the last Sanskara. It took 11 years for Baba to hook me, and that's what he does. He's a divine fisherman. Actually, Baba claimed never to have performed miracles. And to many people, a miracle is something like raising the dead, is something very mind-boggling. But Baba performed miracles, but not in that sense that I know about. Of course, people say that he did. He performs miracles in a very behind-the-scenes, subtle, everyday occurrence type of thing. And it isn't until you look back over the years that you realize all along he'd been performing miracles. He had to, and he had to be divine to have done it, to make the flow of time fit in with the event so exactly. I began as a teacher in Arthur Murray's, as a dancing teacher, way back in 1941. And when I was there, I was having a great time. I had no idea of spirituality. I was an atheist. And I turned many people, I think, from God with my arguments. And scoffed at them. But I was having a grand time. This was during the war years, and I had a lot of boyfriends because at the studio we attracted a lot of men on leave and had a lot of dates. I'd go to nightclubs and we drank and danced and smoked. Well, we did all sorts of things. And that's all I thought was life. That's all life was about. It was a butterfly type of life. I had nothing else in my head, just as you heard Narasha once say earlier, that it's a life sometimes people lead. And that was me. Well, for some reason, I don't know why, I guess there must have been an underlying disillusion, because I kept going to different churches and wondering about them. A friend of mine there who was a Catholic, I mentioned she was Catholic because many Catholics played a big part in my life. She was a very devout Catholic, and she said, why don't you go to my church? I'm sure that you'd find some interest in it. So I went to her church for about a year, and I made novenas and did everything, the whole bit. But when I got through, I thought, well, the other has something, but it wasn't enough for me. So then I went to other churches, and finally back to my own church for a whole year. Went through everything, but, well, they all had something, but it wasn't enough for me to devote myself to them. So I thought, to heck with it, who cares? I'm just going to have a good time. And I was having a great time until there was a strike at Murray's. And we were all out picketing and raising Cain. And my husband, who had been a pupil of mine at Murray's and finally became a teacher there himself, found another studio about a block away, belonged to, above it all, strange name, MeherBabaLibrary. And in that studio, we rented space so that we could take our pupils and teach them in order to keep on living and keep our pupils dancing until the strike was over. Well, while I was there, I was vaguely aware that the owner there was interested in religion of some type. But before I was getting to this point, Baba made scaffoldings, and he tore them down when they were no use anymore. And the way I got to the MeherBabaLibrary studio was I was looking for another job. I thought, I'm through with the dance business. It's no way to make a living. And although I loved it, I thought I'd have to give it up. because once you'd been on strike, you couldn't get a job anywhere else. In another dance studio, they wouldn't have you. But I was offered a job as the director of a slenderizing salon. At the same time, the manager had discussed me with the board of directors of the studio and the MeherBabaLibrary studio, and asked, they decided that they'd ask me to become manager of the studio. And when they did ask me, I had offered this other job. I didn't know which one to take. And they had offered me just a certain percentage of the gross if I would take the job. Well, another girl who was a Catholic, very devout one, asked to have lunch with me one day. She was one of the teachers there. And she said, during the luncheon, she said, the rest of the teachers and I would like you to take the job. Would you be willing to come and be as manager? Not just the management, we would like you to be our manager. I said, well, I don't know. I said, I have this other job. I don't know which one to take. And she said, well, why don't you try praying? I went, pray? I said, you're crazy. I said, but I don't believe in God. What do you think? I wouldn't do such a thing. She said, well, what would you do if you had no job, no family, no friends, no husband, no health, no anything? That shook me a little, but I didn't show it. But when I went, I said, well, I'll let you know. I'll let you know tomorrow, the next day. So I went home and I thought, what would I do? That's strange. What would I do? So I decided to make a deal with God, if there was a God. I said, okay, if you really exist, then do this. Show me. If by tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, the people at the MeherBabaLibrary studio give me what I asked for, and I had told them I didn't want just a percentage of the gross, I wanted a base salary plus a higher percentage of the gross. I never thought they'd do it, because it was a poor studio, and they didn't, they just didn't have much money. I didn't know it at the time. They couldn't advertise, didn't have money for anything, but I said, but I will do it, God, if you have them call me and give me what I asked for. So I thought that's all. So I went to bed, didn't think any more of it. The next morning, I woke up, got up. 10 minutes after 9, the phone rang. And it was the director of the studio. And she said, we have decided to give you what you want. So I thought, well, I accepted, but not because I believed in God. I said, that was a coincidence. Could happen. I just had made a deal with myself. So I thought, all right. I said I would do it. I'm going to do it. So I took it. And while I was at that studio, I noticed one day there was a book lying on the desk. It was called The Edinburgh Lectures on Mental Science by Judge Troward. Well, that impressed me because it sounded intellectual, and so I thought, well, this might be worthwhile reading. So I asked Ma if I could read. She said, sure. And they didn't dare talk to me about their religion because they knew how I felt. I was very standoffish about any discussion about God or religion. Well, I picked up the book, I read it, and the world changed. It was different after I closed it because it was saying, in effect, what Christian Science says. With the mind of man is supreme. It can do anything. But of course, it didn't bring up the God aspect or the personal God. It's just that you could be healthy, wealthy, and wise just by your mind if you concentrate and get what you want. That this is great, And I read everything on it. I took a 2-year college course on it, and I really went gung-ho on the whole thing. Well, that was fine. And then one day, I went up to Camp Father Stout because these people were having something like this up in, it was a beautiful place in the woods near Lake Winnipesaukee. And the leaders of this movement were trying to bring this thought into the Christian churches. It was the Council of Churches of Christ in the United States. And while I was up there, I saw a girl sitting on the beach, and I was tremendously attracted to her, and she to me was like two magnets. And her name was Louise James. And we discussed this religious science thing that we were involved in. And I said, you can do little things with this, with the mind, as I demonstrated it. But I said, you can't really do anything big. What we need is power. She said, I agree with you. I haven't been able to get very far. We need power. Well, how to get this power? Well, the thing is to get a bunch of people, because, every human being, every mind, a bunch of minds, and make more power, people have the same ideas, then we could generate a lot of power. We get them together. So I said, that's what we need. She said, when we go back to New York, I have a friend, his name is Mr. Frederick. And Mr. Frederick is a very intelligent man. He knows loads of people. And maybe through him, we can meet these people, of like mind, and get together and really generate this power. Fine, I said. We went back to New York, and we did. We had these meetings at Louise James's apartment. And we had them every 2 weeks for about a year. And Mr. Frederick came, and he was very intellectual. He had been editor of the Printer's Ink, and he was a gourmet cook, which was up my alley because I love good food. And he would give a talk, and then later on cook something very delicious, and we'd listen to this talk, and we'd eat the food, and we'd have a nice time. But period, that was it. Nothing came out of it. So one day, Mr. Frederick said, I have a daughter who follows an Eastern master. Now, I don't go for this master, and I don't believe it is religion or philosophy, whatever it is. He said, but he's done my daughter an awful lot of good. And he said, you must be tired of listening to me all the time. Why don't we have her come and talk to you? So we said, great, fine. So Phyllis came. It was Phyllis, of course, that came. Actually, now this was a scaffolding. The Maya Berlin studio was a scaffolding, too, because that folded soon after. Folded, Arthur Murray strike, that studio folded, too, after the strike. That was two. This is the third scaffolding, gone. But you see, I didn't realize it at the time. I just thought that those events that happen in one's life. But then looking back, I see, put all these together, then you see the pattern. Well, here I was. The last meeting was held in a different place. How, why, I don't know. It was a huge apartment on 47th Street on the east side. I don't know who the people were or anything, but I know there was a grand piano in the place, and some people played the piano, some people sang, others gave talks, some people read their own poetry. It was a very intellectual evening, and everybody was just fine. And then Phyllis came, and they put a cushion on the floor, and Phyllis came, and she just sat there very simply, and as I say in the Bible, she opened her mouth and spake. And she talked about Meher Baba. Now, at that time, of course, Baba had not declared himself as the highest of the high. She spoke Baba as a perfect master, which to me was a maestro, a master of some kind. But I loved the way she spoke. It was simple, it was direct, and she gave answers to questions which no priest or rabbi or anybody ever questioned, most of them said, well, they got stuck on a question, well, we just have to believe. Well, I'm not just going to believe because I have to believe. That's no good. I was quite a skeptic, too, still am, as a matter of fact. And it was difficult for me to accept. I have to know. I have to know, or I won't take it. But she answered questions on why do experimental animals suffer, why are wars, why do people suffer, why were the Jews suffering in Germany, and all these things. And some people were very angry, became very abusive, as a matter of fact. But Phyllis wasn't abusive or angry back. She just was very calm and just talked easily, And I thought, that impressed me too. And so I thought, I've got to know more. It was still intellectual, but she did impress me. So at the end of the meeting, Phyllis said, well, we're having Baba meetings on Monday night, the Winterfeld's home, and if you leave your names and phone numbers and address, I will get in touch with you and let you know when they're going to be held. Fine, so I left mine, Louise left hers. A couple of weeks later, I got a notice. There was a meeting at MeherBabaLibrary at the Monday night group at the Winterfeld's house. I got all excited. I said, picked up the phone, called Louise. I said, Louise, let's go. I said, here we are, but, these people have got in touch. Oh, I got one too, she said. I said, well, let's go. She said, no, it's just another weirdo group that they have on 57th Street. She said, the old weirdos, we don't want to go there. So I said, oh, all right, who wants to go with a weirdo group? Well, we're still having a grand time, but by now things begin to come down heavy. Things are being lowered. The boom was lowering. My father had a cerebral hemorrhage. My mother developed cancer. My marriage was breaking up. My job wasn't that good. My health was going. I thought I didn't have long to live. I was getting to the point now where I was in the spot where that friend of mine, that teacher, had said, what would you do if you didn't have friends, didn't have family, didn't have jobs, didn't have your health, didn't have this? Here I was, and the very thing that she said. You see how Papa uses people, even to say things. My own brother-in-law brought me to the Arthur Murray studio, and he was also a Catholic, and he never took to Baba at all, even after I met him. He just never fell for it at all. But he was used to see by Baba. Well, now to get back to where where was I now?
Everything was coming apart.
What? Oh, yeah, the boom was being lowered on me, that's true. And I decided, I got another call again, another notice from Phyllis saying that there was a meeting. I called Louise again, and Louise said, no, I went there. It was sort of a betrayal, I thought, in a way, to go without me. But she said, but I went there, and I saw a picture of him on the wall. She said, and he's going bald. She said, if he can't save his own hair, how's he going to help us? How's he going to help us? So I thought, she's right. She's right. Well, another couple of weeks went by. Again, I got a notice. And I found out later that people wanted to clear the list. And Phyllis kept saying, no, keep the name on the list, keep the names on the list. She resisted it, and I'm glad she did. What would have happened if she hadn't, Well, finally, a third notice, or I don't know how many notices, but I only remember 3 come. So I called Louise again. And I said, Louise, I got another notice to go. I want to go. She said, no. I said, well, I'm going. She said, all right, I'll go with you. So we went. And that night we went to Longchamp, had dinner. Then we stopped off at the Winterfelds, rang the bell, and there was one person who I shall not name, came to the door and said, who are you? Not anybody, this is professional people, not anybody can get in here. And I was very hot temper, which I still have, unfortunately. And I blew up and I said, well, I've been thrown out of better places than this. Louise, let's go. Louise said, no. She was very stubborn. I'm staying. And just then, Fred Winterfeld came to the door. And he was very sweet. Oh, do come in. And he was just as nice as, I was so mollified, I just went in. First thing I did was go right to the picture on the wall. There's a picture of Baba sitting in a tree with his arm on his knee like this. And I looked at it and I liked him right away. But I still didn't know who he was, but I liked him. And I thought, Louise is crazy. She doesn't know what she's talking about, So then, Fred Winterfeld was very nice. I must have bored the devil out of him because here I had to tell him all about my troubles at home, my mother, my father, my this, my that. And he listened and he listened. He was very sweet. And I went back again. And I went 2 or 3 times, I think. And then I told his boyfriend, I was one of my big flames then, about it. And he became interested, too. Well, by then, I still didn't know who Baba was. Spiritually, I was very, very low. I didn't know, I thought that, I began to come to the point where I felt that, well, there's not a personal God, but everything is electricity all around us. And what keeps us alive is electricity. And this electricity, when we die, goes out into this big reservoir of electricity, and that's the end of us. Individually, we do not exist after. But then new souls come in and are fed from this electricity. And that's my concept at that time. Also, someone told me that to have a spiritual experience was to see a blue light. Well, I thought, I have to see a blue light somehow. Well, then I began to read a few books from India, but they weren't books on spirituality, they're just books on yoga. And I thought, when I heard about Baba, perfect master, well, he's a master in yoga. And he's the one that's going to teach me how to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. I had to get everything I want. And he's the master. And I realized by then I couldn't do anything myself. I knew that all the things I was doing, I wasn't getting anywhere. So he was going to be the one that was going to show me, because I had to have a guide of some kind. At least that was a little progress, even though I didn't know what I was doing. So Phyllis, and I heard of the group that Baba was going to come to the United States. Now, we got the discourses at that time only because I went to the public library and copied them down in shorthand, and then went home and typed them, and then made several copies and distributed them to everybody. So we read the discourses that way. The only set of discourses was probably a set that Phyllis had, and they had it at the Monday night group, and they read them. So this boyfriend of mine and I, we accepted everything but the one on sex. This we couldn't buy, but we accepted everything else. That was held in reserve. Well, Baba was coming, and we heard that he was going to be at Myrtle Beach in May of 1952. And Louise and the man from the studio, the treasurer of the studio, had become interested. And not so much MeherBaba, but maybe a little bit. And this boyfriend, I call him F, and we decided we'd drive down. But it worked out that for one reason or another, we just couldn't make it by car. So I thought, I think he's coming to New York. No, has no schedule to come to New York. He's not coming to New York. I said, I'm sure he's coming to New York. Well, it turned out he did. That was when he had the accident, and then he went back to the center. And in July, he did come to New York. And it was decided that groups would go in to see Baba. And we were told we were not by any means to ask him questions. We were just to, go by, be introduced, and pass on, like looking at the crown jewels, just that sort of thing. And that was all. So I said, well, that was all right. But by then I was getting so involved with this new flame of mine, I was beginning to cool down. Well, I didn't care if I met him or not. This Maya was having sway over me again. I was getting off on another path. However, in a way, this flame of mine was sort of helped me to get to Baba, because I said to him, do you want to go and see him? He said, yeah, I do. I want to see him. So I said, all right, I'll call Ivy Deuce because Bob was to come to Ivy Deuce's apartment on the West 67th Street. I think it was the Beaux-Arts. And he would be there, and we'd meet him. We'd go in with the Monday night group. So but Philip couldn't make that. Philip, I gave his name out. I'm sorry. His F. He couldn't. I'm the biggest blabbermouth. But he couldn't make it. He had to go on a business trip to Texas, so he had to take an earlier plane. So I called Ivy Deuce thinking, I was really interested. So maybe she'll say we can't make it because we couldn't go in with the Monday night group. But she said, oh yes, I'll put you in an hour early. You can both come in earlier. So you see, down a greased slide. Well, the day came, we were to meet Baba. It was a hot day. It was over 100 degrees. And the kind of life, well, in those days, people were more elegantly, used to dress very elegantly, very few people went around like we do today, very casually dressed. I had long black gloves on up to here. The kind of life we led was like, demanded that kind of dress. And it was so hot, and long black gloves on a hot day, I just don't understand it today, but that's how it was. That's what you did. Well, we went. And I remember, I went in first, and Philip right after me. And Baba I don't remember seeing anybody else. They tell me the Mandali was with him. But Baba was reclining in a long white sadra on this, half reclining on it. sofa. And the minute I stepped on the threshold, an actual physical shock came right through my feet, right to my head, went zoom, boom, like that. And it almost took my breath away. I looked at him, and he looked at me, and the love came out, just like a big wave went bang, right over, just like a tidal wave went right over me. And I was, it was confusing because I wasn't expecting anything like this. And he looked at me as if, and he turned his head to the side as if he was in bliss, just like that, just to see me. And I thought, well, he doesn't know me. Why should he be so? He looked like he knew me. And as if he expected me, not as an ordinary visitor, but as, he really had an appointment with me, why me? It was confusing. I was a little bit upset about it. And the funny part of it is, it sounds blasphemous to say it, but that look on his face, that ecstasy, it reminded me of a dog I had that used to be so happy to see me when I was absent for a while. She'd stand and she'd turn her head to one side and she'd wag her tail and she couldn't move. She'd shake all over in just joy to see me again. And I think Baba did that on purpose because of that, Because he knew that was a soft spot in my heart. He strikes you right where you're tenderest. See? Got at me through my dog, you see. And then I was pushed to go ahead. But Philip was right. It seemed like centuries. And I couldn't think anymore. But it could only have been a second. Do all this in that short time. But somebody pushed me behind and I had to go forward. I didn't expect to shake hands with him, but he put out his hand, and here I had this long black glove on. And I didn't have time to take it off. I was so embarrassed. Well, I had to shake hands with the glove on. I later lost that glove. And meantime, I thought, well, if we have to say goodbye, then I have to shake hands again. So I started struggling with these gloves. Baba said there was a low stool next to him, and I sat just to his right, and stood next to me. And Baba spelled on, he was using the board then, and he said, I know them, but they don't know me. And then he said something else about the work we would do for him or something, which by then, I don't remember, mine was so mixed up by then, I just don't know everything, just caught flashes of what he was saying. And then I felt I had to look at him, and he looked deep down into my eyes, and I felt it go right down, down, down. And something inside of me was like a wild animal. It was stirred with fear. I don't know what it was, but it was, I just can't describe the look, but it was just right, it went down to my very boots. And then he looked away, and then he turned to Philip, and he said, I had an uncle that looked like him. And that sort of made him, well, that made me so jealous all of a sudden. After all, I didn't know who Baba was. I was in love with Philip, not him. And here I was jealous. I ought to kill Philip. I mean, I thought, Baba likes him and he doesn't like me. It's him he wants, not me. All this. And then all of a sudden, the terrible sex thoughts came into my mind. Where they came from, I don't know. But it was just awful, awful. I thought, what do I think? How would this happen? Oh, it was awful. And then Baba dismissed us. And then we got up and Baba put out his hand again. By this time I had taken the gloves off. We shook hands again. We went out. Went down into the street. Boiling. It was like stepping on a hot frying pan to step on that pavement. And it was so warm. And all of a sudden I began to shiver. And I had goosebumps all over me. I was so cold, my teeth were chattering. I was shaking from head to foot. And I was just like, Philip said, what's the matter with you? I said, I don't know, I'm so cold, cold. And he said, then he also said, what's the matter? And he said, he had a very sensitive stomach. He said, oh my God, something's wrong with my stomach. I have butterflies in my stomach. And I said, you know what? He said, I think we need a drink. Well, that's how we were in those days. We didn't think we'd met God or anything, it was just a yogi, a master of yoga or something in my mind. So he said, we need a drink. So we got in a cab, we went down to the Commodore Hotel, we had hot whiskey sours, and we watched the baseball game on TV. Which was
just gives you an idea what Baba has, the type of people Baba had to work with. I mean, you thinking it was easy. It wasn't. You know, you people come to Baba, many of you, how many of you here have met Baba? Well, you see, you people come to Baba, and you're all full of love, and you caught fire immediately. Baba had to use a blowtorch on me. I mean, you see how I think you're closer to him than I was, you know, because I was so sodden in a way. I feel like I was being pulled apart. It was, and finally I made the gesture, why are you sending me away and pulling me at the same time? And then he went like this. And I could go. I was able to leave. And I went back to the group, but I was in such a state, you know, from that. But this was the high point. It was such a play of love, that's all I can call it. I don't know what else to call it. But Baba's eyes, his love, it was tangible. It wasn't just a feeling, it was tangible. You could feel it physically, emotionally, in every way. And in this way, Baba binds you to him so such a way that you can never get free. Never. Now, we got about 5 or 6 minutes. Oh, this shows Baba's humor. Baba, this time we were walking to the Baba with a marvelous sense of humor. We were walking to the barn, and all of us, I used to stick close to him as much as possible. I'd sit as close, I'd practically usurp Baba, you know, I was right there, right at his feet, and whenever he was walking, I was trying to stay right on his heels. And Burl had the same idea. You probably heard of Burl Williams. She was one of the 5. Well, Baba was walking along as only Baba could walk, at a great clip, big strides, and we all had to run to keep up with him. Even men with long legs had to run to keep up with him. And Baba wasn't that tall, but he could go. And Burl and I were right on his heels, and she was going to stay, and I was going to stay. And finally I accused her of nudging me, you know, pushing me. She accused me, you're shoving me out of the way. And we carried on a mini war right behind, but he must have known what was going on. Just going on, and walking along, you know. It isn't, not all sweetness and light, you know, when you're with Baba. We're going along the great clip, racing along, and suddenly Baba made a sharp right-angle turn, and we all ran off into the bushes. Baba standing there watching us go like that. And then we all got together again. We kept going to the barn. That's rather a long walk, as you know. We're going along Great Cliff. Again, Burl and I, right on his heel, and he suddenly stopped dead. And I trod on Baba's heels, and everybody in the back be piled up like dominoes. You know, and I said, "Woo, excuse me, Baba." You know, and he made out he didn't feel anything. But you see, that shows Baba's sense of humor. Well, one last story. Gee, I really stuck to the thing. My 5 points. The leave taking. When Baba went to Australia, we went to see him off. We were in San Francisco at the time, and Baba left for Australia. Baba was at the airport, and he gathered around us. We gathered around him in a big circle. And I felt, you know, I'm pretty good. People were crying, and this, and I'm not crying. I wasn't going to cry. It was great. We're standing there, and Baba's going around saying goodbye, each one in turn. He comes to me and he goes, and I go, oh, you know, there'll never be another time like that. And then we watched this plane till it was just disappeared. And believe me, if love could possibly have brought that plane out of the sky, it would have dragged it right down, right back. You know, it was just, we were just, I don't know, he must have felt it. He couldn't help it himself. All those people just watching to the very end. You've probably seen in the movies the one with the tail that went up at the end. There was one plane that's tail went up, and that was Baba's plane. And that was the greatest time. And, when Baba dropped his body, I was very attached to that body as a result of all this. It was, when he dropped his body, a piece of me went with him. And that's how it was. Bye, Baba.